to the shape of your nose. Pull down the mask's bottom so it covers your mouth and your chin. After use, take off the mask. Remove the elastic loops from behind the ears while keeping the mask away from your face and clothes. To avoid touching potentially contaminated surfaces of the mask, discard the mask in a closed bin immediately after use.
The symptoms of the coronavirus are similar to those of the common flu or cold, which are consistent coughing and sneezing, fever that does not go away, and difficulty breathing. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms, it is advisable to stay at home until you recover, or if you want to go to your doctor, call first and tell your doctor of your symptoms, any recent travel or contact with travelers. And lastly, please avoid spitting in public. Recent cases have shown that people most likely to be at risk if they contract the virus are persons over age 60 and persons that have an underlying medical condition such as hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease, or a respiratory condition. It is advisable to avoid large crowds or other places where you might have to come in contact with people who are showing signs of the coronavirus. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. To avoid getting the coronavirus, remember to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently before and after preparing food, after using the toilet or changing a diaper for a baby, sick person, or the elderly, after blowing your nose, and after leaving large gatherings or moving away from persons who appear ill. Encourage others to wash their hands and also use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer of 60 to 70% solution. Stay away from events having large gatherings of people. You can expose yourself to more possible infections in large groups. Also, avoid sharing cutlery, cups, glassware, etc. with others. Viruses can linger on these items and may be transferred this way. Avoid shaking and holding hands, and hugging or keeping an infected person in close proximity. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. To avoid getting the coronavirus, remember to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently before and after preparing food, after using the toilet or changing a diaper for a baby, sick person, or the elderly, after blowing your nose, and after leaving large gatherings or moving away from persons who appear ill. Encourage others to wash their hands and also use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer of 60 to 70% solution. Stay away from events having large gatherings of people. You can expose yourself to more possible infections in large groups. Also, avoid sharing cutlery, cups, glassware, etc. with others. Viruses can linger on these items and may be transferred this way. Avoid shaking and holding hands, and hugging or keeping an infected person in close proximity. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA.
When you feel a sneeze or a cough coming, try to prevent sneezing or coughing into your hands, as this will contaminate your hands and spread germs. Covering your mouth prevents the spread of germs. You probably knew that, but the way you cover up also matters. And that means breaking a habit you've done all your life. Cover your mouth and nose with flexed elbow or a tissue, not your hands. Discard the used tissue in an appropriate bin immediately. Then, wash your hands with soap and running water to help stop the spread of germs. Turn on water. Wet hands. Apply soap and lather up. Focus on washing your hands for at least 20 seconds. Wash the front of your hands, the back, between fingers and around the nails. Rinse hands under running water. Use something clean to wipe your hands, preferably a disposable paper towel. The best way to wash your hands is using running water and soap, but sometimes we don't have that available. When not available, use hand sanitizer that should have at least 60% alcohol content. Your health is your responsibility. This message was brought to you by the Ministry of Health, St. Kitts.
I am Officer Donnelly Liebird Shiverton. Do you want to travel and don't have private transportation? Here are some travel safety tips to keep yourself and the persons around you safe from the coronavirus. When venturing out in public, it is recommended that you wear a mask at all times. Sanitize your hands before and after entering public transportation. The bus operators are also encouraged to sanitize their buses after each trip. Remember, always practice good respiratory hygiene. That means refraining from touching your face with unwashed hands. Always practice physical distancing. To maintain physical distance, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis stipulates that only 2 passengers are allowed per row. That is, 1 passenger on each end of the bus row, while 1 passenger is allowed to sit up front with the driver. This means that only 9 passengers are allowed in a passenger bus. Remember, stay safe, travel wisely as we work together to flatten the curve.
Before touching the mask, clean hands with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. Take the mask and inspect it for tears or holes. Orient which side is the top side, where the metal strip is. Ensure the proper side of the mask faces outwards, the colored side. Place the mask to your face. Pinch the metal strip or stiff edge of the mask so it molds to the shape of your nose. Pull down the mask's bottom so it covers your mouth and your chin. After use, take off the mask. Remove the elastic loops from behind the ears while keeping the mask away from your face and clothes. To avoid touching potentially contaminated surfaces of the mask, discard the mask in a closed bin immediately after use.
Symptoms of the coronavirus are similar to those of the common flu or cold, which are consistent coughing and sneezing, fever that does not go away, and difficulty breathing. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms, it is advisable to stay at home until you recover, or if you want to go to your doctor, call first and tell your doctor of your symptoms, any recent travel or contact with travelers. And lastly, please avoid spitting in public. Recent cases have shown that people most likely to be at risk if they contract the virus are persons over age 60 and persons that have an underlying medical condition such as hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease, or a respiratory condition. It is advisable to avoid large crowds or other places where you might have to come in contact with people who are showing signs of the coronavirus. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEPA. To avoid getting the coronavirus, remember to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently before and after preparing food, after using the toilet or changing a diaper for a baby, sick person, or the elderly, after blowing your nose, and after leaving large gatherings or moving away from persons who appear ill. Encourage others to wash their hands and also use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer of 60 to 70% solution. Stay away from events having large gatherings of people. You can expose yourself to more possible infections in large groups. Also, avoid sharing cutlery, cups, glassware, etc. with others. Viruses can linger on these items and may be transferred this way. Avoid shaking and holding hands, and hugging or keeping an infected person in close proximity. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. To avoid getting the coronavirus, remember to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently before and after preparing food, after using the toilet or changing a diaper for a baby, sick person, or the elderly, after blowing your nose, and after leaving large gatherings or moving away from persons who appear ill. Encourage others to wash their hands and also use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer of 60 to 70% solution. Stay away from events having large gatherings of people. You can expose yourself to more possible infections in large groups. Also, avoid sharing cutlery, cups, glassware, etc. with others. Viruses can linger on these items and may be transferred this way.
Is on. Is on.
Good day and welcome once again to our National Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 briefing for today, the 30th day of March 2022. Thank you very much for joining us, as usual, for our COVID-19 briefing. We haven't been here for a while, and as you can see, the stats are looking good for now. We have been managing very well the wave that brought the Omicron that brought the wave that we had. And we have done very well, and we have to congratulate, of course, all who played their part, and you are a part of that management of the COVID-19 pandemic. You too played your part, of course, the task force, the health team, and all of us, we played our part. So we are to be congratulated for the success that we have had with managing that wave. I want to invite first to the podium Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, who is the Medical Chief of Staff at the Joseph N. France General Hospital, to bring us his presentation. Dr. Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Lesroy. Today is the last of the regular COVID-19 briefings, and I am extremely pleased with where we are now as a nation in this 2-year fight against the deadly virus. We as a team We have been coming here almost every week since March 2020 to report to you on the COVID-19 pandemic. All of the briefings were just for about an hour. There were many long hours of meetings and preparations that preceded us coming here, in addition to our regular daily work that did not go away because of COVID. This was the period when we as a people faced the greatest threat of our lifetime and the greatest threat in our nation's history, the COVID-19 pandemic. But we were indeed happy to have answered the call to service. I remember earlier on in the pandemic, about 2 years ago, when we were first called to Cabinet to discuss the way forward. We sat around the huge table at government headquarters with all the ministers in a room that was filled with great uncertainty about the future we faced with this deadly virus, but united in a common cause to keep our people safe. This was before vaccines and before the knowledge of the effectiveness of non-pharmaceuticals, and getting infected was literally a death sentence. It was a time when some who could leave were leaving. Countries were beginning to close their borders, and we as a tiny independent nation were left to fend for ourselves. We made a very important decision then to turn a huge tourist ship back in an effort to reduce the risk of exposure in our life-first approach. To some, it was a controversial decision, but it proved over time to be the right one. Over the next 2 years, we made many more tough decisions in our successful management of this pandemic, bringing us worldwide recognition. The decisions were not always popular, but were decisions that steered us to a path of bringing wave after wave of infection under control with minimal hospitalizations and death. I believe our success in the fight was due to the fact that we in health and at the task force level were given the latitude to make decisions based on scientific evidence and facts as they unfolded, and our decisions were devoid of any political interference. We kept science at the core of every decision we made and stayed focused and did not get distracted. We told you very early of our simple four-pronged approach to the management of the pandemic with the assessment of our progress at every stage. This was, 1, to keep the virus at bay for as long as possible with very stringent screening protocols at our port of entry. We were successful at this, being one of the last places on the face of the earth to have its first imported case on March the 24th, 2020. 2, that once the virus arrived, our aim was to limit hospitalizations and death with our aggressive ring fencing contact tracing exercise, where we casted a wide web to identify all possibly infected persons and protect the most vulnerable among us. We were again successful at achieving this, as we were one of the few nations to have had 0 deaths and no major hospitalizations as a result of COVID-19 disease 16 months into the pandemic, until we entered our second wave on May 19, 2021. Our success at managing this pandemic then caused us to be recognized internationally as the country with the lowest rate of confirmed cases and having the lowest risk of COVID-19 in this hemisphere. 3, it was to limit the time between the development of community spread and the arrival of a vaccine, while at the same time keeping everyone safe with the prescription of non-pharmaceuticals. We were again successful in achieving this, having started our vaccine rollout on February the 22nd, 2021, while we were still COVID-free. The 4th and final leg was to vaccinate a significant proportion of the population to get us to an immunity threshold so that we could effectively fight off the continued and relentless attack of the virus and open back our country safely and get back to some sense of normalcy. Today, we have one of the highest vaccination population coverage in the region without a government-imposed mandate, with 82.9% of adults with at least 1 shot and 77.8% of adults fully vaccinated. We are continually asked by our Caribbean colleagues how we were able to have such a successful vaccine rollout program while others struggled. The answer we give is encapsulated in one word: confidence. Our people had confidence in the message that was being delivered through our education program about the vaccines and their safety and efficacy. Our people had confidence in the health services offering the vaccines, which is why they turned up in their large numbers at our health centers throughout St. Kitts and Nevis to be vaccinated. Our people had confidence in the policy makers deciding on the rollout, starting with our Prime Minister, the two health ministers who helped manage this pandemic, our Chief Medical Officer, and every member of the health team. I want to put on record my commendation for our Prime Minister for the astute leadership he provided during this crisis, a leadership style that brought out the best in all of us for the benefit of all. We called for an all-of-society approach in this fight, and you responded. We were able to unite the country to defeat this invisible foe for which we had no blueprint of past experience to guide us. It was because we as a people remained united in our efforts why we were successful. And I do believe that as we begin to emerge from the stranglehold that COVID-19 has had on our everyday life, that it is our combined efforts that will take us into a successful post-pandemic era for the benefit of all. Because of our united efforts, we have gotten through the worst part of this, or the worst period of this pandemic, relatively unscathed, compared to many nations, great and small, far and near, with only 43 deaths, many of which were preventable. Today, we have 0 patients hospitalized in St. Kitts and Nevis, and the COVID wards have been closed for about 5 weeks. We have 0 active cases in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we have one of the highest adult vaccination coverage in the region without a government-imposed mandate. We have come a long way over the last 2 years from border closures, lockdowns, curfews, and significant restrictions on our daily activities to a near normalcy now. Our children are all back to full in-class learning. We are now having mass events, and every sector of our society has reopened. We are beginning to open our doors to the rest of the world with significant reduction in the stringent entry protocols, with a move to the rapid antigen tests for entry on the 1st of April. We now have a sufficient population immunity through vaccination and infection to absorb more risk and move forward boldly but safely. I must hasten to add that 0 laboratory-confirmed COVID cases does not mean 0 COVID. The virus did not suddenly disappear because the situation report tile showed 0 in the active case section. Also, with the relaxation of entry restrictions, the virus will continue to enter our ports once it remains a threat globally. The virus is still out there and still presents a significant threat to the vulnerable. We just lost another elderly person to COVID-19 on Monday this week. Let us remain vigilant and not get complacent. As we move forward, we all need to take more personal responsibility in this fight, as your singular action can affect all of us. I urge you to continue the use of the non-pharmaceuticals to protect yourself, and more importantly, get vaccinated and boosted if you are eligible to do so. Data continue to show the importance of vaccination and booster doses to protect individuals both from infection and severe outcomes from COVID-19. During the recent Omicron surge, those who were boosted were 21 times less likely to die from COVID-19 compared to those who were unvaccinated, and 7 times less likely to be hospitalized. The importance of getting vaccinated continues to be crucially important in this fight. Finally, it was an honor for me to have served with the dedicated team of the NEOC led by Dr. Hazel Laws, and the team from the task force and the NEOC led by Mr. Abdias Samuels. But more importantly, it was my honor and pleasure to have served you, the people of the Federation, coming here week after week for the last 2 years to update you and answer your questions. And although you will no longer be seeing us here on a regular basis, we will continue to fight behind the scenes to keep you safe until this pandemic is fully in the rearview mirror. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilkinson. I now invite our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, to give us her presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. This afternoon, I will share with you the Health Emergency Operating Committee's situation report for Wednesday, March the 30th. I will begin by providing a review of our COVID-19 response over the past 2.25 years. Our response to COVID-19 spans 2.25 years, from January 2020 to present. So it was December the 31st, 2019, that the World Health Organization brought this unusual virus and unusual presentation of respiratory tract illness being identified in China. In January of 2020, the WHO declared it a public health emergency of international concern. And then on March 11th, 2020, the WHO declared the COVID-19 outbreak a global pandemic. In March the 31st to April 25th, 2020, we had our first strict lockdown. And then the cruise industry reopened in July 2021. So this just highlights some significant occurrences over this past 2.25 years. It was January the 23rd that the Ministry of Health increased its presence at the Robert Llewellyn Bratcher International Airport, when we strengthened our port health surveillance and begun screening inbound passengers. And it was on March the 25th, 2020, the then Minister of Health, Honorable Wendy Phipps, announced the first 2 COVID-19 cases in the Federation. It was on that day that NEOC, the National Emergency Operating Center, was activated, and also the Health Emergency Operating Center. Both were activated on that day, and we started having regular meetings of the NEOC. It was February the 22nd, 2021, last February, that we started administering the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, and then it was the 1st of September, 2021, that we rolled out the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. So this provides a summary of the significant events that took place in our response to COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of the health and travel protocols that have kept us safe, these are some landmark dates. Okay, so it was the 31st of October that we reopened our airports to inbound air travelers. All inbound air travelers at that time had to complete 14 days of quarantine. And then it was May the 1st, 2021, the quarantine period for the fully vaccinated inbound air traveler was reduced from 14 days to 9 days. And then we had a further reduction in this quarantine period on the 12th of July, 2021. And then on the 6th of October, 2021, the quarantine period was reduced to 24 hours. And then on December the 11th, 2021, all inbound vaccinated travelers could enter and integrate into our society without any period of quarantine. Now, on the 1st of March, the unvaccinated or partially vaccinated returning nationals, they could spend or complete their 7-day quarantine period at home without the security facility. And then the most recent change that was approved by Cabinet comes into effect this Friday, April the 1st, when all inbound travelers can submit, or you have the option of submitting a negative rapid antigen test for entry into the Federation. So this just summarizes the major changes to our health and travel protocols over the past year and a half. As I said before, it was March the 25th that we announced our first 2 cases, and this just provides you a snapshot of the media release that was issued or disseminated on March 25th, 2020, when we announced the first 2 cases that were identified almost midnight Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. It was on June the 17th of last year that we recorded our first COVID-19 death. Between then and now, we've recorded 43 COVID-19 related deaths. The most recent took place on Sunday, and I want to just pause and extend my deepest sympathy to the friends and family of the deceased. Now, this slide provides an overview of the 4 waves of COVID-19 infections that we have successfully contained. And so the first wave of COVID-19 infections took place between March the 24th and April the 15th. So ladies and gentlemen, it took us 1 month to contain the first wave of COVID-19 infections. In this wave, we added 15 cases to our COVID-19 tally. And then between April the 15th, 2020 to May 19th, we added 30 positive cases of COVID-19 over that period. Our borders were open, and those 30 cases were all imported cases. They were all inbound travelers. Our second wave of COVID-19, it took us 2 months to contain the second wave, between May 19th, 2021 to July 15, 2021. In this wave, we added 610 positive cases to our tally, and we recorded 3 COVID-19 related deaths. It took us 3 months to contain our third wave, between August the 15, 2021 to November the 15, 2021. In this period, we added 2,167 positive COVID-19 cases, and we recorded 25 COVID-19 related deaths during this time period. It took us 3 months to successfully contain our fourth wave, between Christmas Eve last year, December 2021, to March 29, 2022. We added 2,727 positive cases in the fourth wave. We've only recorded 15 COVID-19 related deaths during this period. Please note that the Lambda variant of COVID-19 drove the second and third waves, and the Omicron variant was responsible predominantly for the fourth wave. And I think we can say it was the original strain of COVID-19 that drove the first wave. And in terms of COVID-19 testing as a federation, we have tested, our testing rate has been acceptable, and we've been we got support from 5 labs. So at this time, we have 5 labs providing us COVID-19 testing capabilities. And so we have the lab at Alexandra Hospital, We have the lab at the JNF General Hospital, and we have 3 private labs. And so our COVID-19 test rates has been at an acceptable level. So this is a summary of the 4 waves of infection that we have successfully contained. Our current COVID-19 status, I'm sharing with you some roses, pictures taken. In terms of our vaccination program, 82.9% of the adults in our population have received the first dose, and 77.8% of the adults in our population are fully vaccinated. 9.7% of the adults have come forward and received their booster shots. In terms of the children, 12 to 17 years, 19.1% have come forward and received the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, and 17.5% of these teenagers are fully vaccinated. This slide shows the data or vaccination data disaggregated by island, and as you can see, 56.3% of the total population, St. Kitts and Nevis, are fully vaccinated, and we have one of the highest COVID-19 vaccination rates in the Caribbean, and for this we must be proud, and we want to thank the people of the Federation who trusted us in terms of the information we provided, and you came on board and you accepted the vaccine. And so this is the summary slide that shows that 5,549 laboratory-confirmed cases of COVID-19 have been reported for the Federation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 0 active cases at present. 5,506 cases have successfully recovered, and to date we've recorded 43 COVID-19 related deaths, and you can see the data disaggregated by island, St. Kitts and Nevis. This shows the relevant data with respect to the COVID-19 related deaths. You can see about 2/3 of the cases were male, so there are preponderance of males who have died from COVID. Majority of the cases were unvaccinated, almost 84%, and most were older adults, over 60, and with chronic underlying conditions. And so this just highlights, provides you the information regarding the changes to our health and travel protocols that become effective this week, Friday, the 1st of April. All inbound air travelers are permitted now to submit a negative COVID-19 RT-PCR test or a rapid antigen test. The RT-PCR test must be done within 72 hours of arrival, and the rapid antigen test must be done within a day prior to arrival in the Federation. The samples, nasopharyngeal, oropharyngeal. Please note that we are not recommending self-administered tests or home test kits. Prior to coming here, I got a call with respect to the rapid antigen test, and in response, what I would say is, if you're coming to St. Kitts from the United Kingdom, you can do the rapid antigen test within 1 day of travel and submit same before coming into the Federation. You could upload same on your KNA travel form, and you'll be good to go. Now, in terms of the World Health Organization global targets, there are 4, whereby all territories, jurisdictions globally will be assessed in terms of their response to COVID-19, and they are hoping that each territory can vaccinate 70% of their people by mid-year this year, 2022. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we've already attained the 56.3% mark. and they are hoping that each territory can achieve a minimum testing rate of 100 tests per 100,000 people per day. And in the Federation, we've already passed this minimum. In terms of provision of care for all of our cases, all our COVID-19 laboratory confirmed cases have received adequate care, either from our case managers, hospitals, health centers, and all our essential healthcare workers have been protected by PPE, appropriate PPE, and by vaccination coverage. And so we are doing quite well in terms of the WHO global targets. All right, so this is a big question. Will COVID-19 go away? Will it get worse? Will it fade into the background? Will it become a seasonal flu? And so the scientists are trying to come up with the answers to these questions. And so there was an interesting article in the New York Times on the 28th of March, whereby the scientists are already beginning to answer some of these questions. The virus's Omicron variant was significantly more infectious and more resistant to vaccines than the original strain that emerged in 2020. And so there's no reason, at least biologically, that the virus won't continue to evolve. So in other words, the consensus is that going forward, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, will continue to evolve and mutate. This is a slide taken from that same article in the New York Times, whereby on the x-axis it shows the estimated reduction in the effectiveness of the antibodies generated through vaccine, meaning the current vaccines that we are using. And then on the y-axis, it shows the level of infectivity or transmissibility of the various COVID-19 variants. And as you can see, the Omicron variant is the most contagious to date, and it is the variant that has evaded the current vaccines the most. And this trend, what the scientists are saying or suggesting, is that this trend will or may continue. Taking all this together, we expect SARS-CoV-2 will continue to cause new epidemics, but they will increasingly be driven by the ability to skirt the immune system. In this sense, the future may look something like the seasonal flu, where new variants cause waves of cases each year. And so going forward, what they're trying to say is that we can expect a surge in cases from time to time. And these new variants that will evolve may continue to evade the current vaccines. And so the scientists, they have their work cut out for them in terms of their ability to develop broader variant-proof vaccines. So in other words, going forward, as a people, as a federation, what would we have to do in terms of COVID-19? Well, we need to we're going to have to depend on the non-pharmaceutical measures and depend on the broader variant-proof vaccines that will be developed. And so the COVID-19, the non-pharmaceutical measures or the COVID-19 protective measures remain. The vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine provides a layer of protection against COVID. And those of us who are vaccinated, we have benefited and continue to benefit from the immunity gained from or through vaccination. And then the wearing of the face mask will continue to be very important as we go forward and face the emerging strains of the COVID-19 virus. And hand hygiene will continue to be very important, and our ability to maintain our distance as far as possible will also be very important. And, you know, the last point in terms of persons who are experiencing respiratory tract symptoms, you know, it's really important for you to stay at home and get tested because it may be COVID, it may not be COVID. And so the COVID-19 protective measures will continue to be very important as we go through the rest of 2022 and 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been 2.25 years that we've been coming to you in terms of providing you the NEOC situation report. And we've been coming to you, providing you the latest scientific information regarding the virus and the vaccines. And you've listened, you've gained our trust, and you've come on board in terms of accepting the vaccine. You've come on board in terms of adhering to the COVID-19 protective measures. And it is this afternoon with deep pleasure that I say thank you for your support over this past 2.25 years. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Laws. We now have Superintendent Cromwell Henry, who will give us his presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good afternoon to all listening to this broadcast via whatever means. I must first apologize early. In my haste to get here, I forgot my spectacles, and so I may have a bit of a challenge reading my notes. But nonetheless, I'm familiar with the material, and so I should be able to get through. But just in case, I apologize in advance. The security forces continue to do our part to ensure that our federation remains safe. We have done so in collaboration with other security agencies, as well as the Ministry of Health. We have gone through 4 COVID-19 waves of infection, which have adversely impacted our operations. Yet, we were able to deliver on our mandate to protect the community, both in terms of our crime prevention and detection mandate, as well as our mandate to assist the Ministry of Health to preserve public health. Our greatest challenge was the enforcement of the COVID-19 prevention protocols, particularly as they relate to mass gatherings. Since our last briefing, we have received a significant number of applications for social events. We have received nearly 300 applications so far for the month of March in St. Kitts alone, and most of these applications have been approved. Given our current COVID-19 status, we consider the risk to be low. Therefore, our focus is on your physical safety and security at these events. One of the mechanisms we use to manage this is the event application process. Please note that it is still a legal requirement to apply to the police for permission to host any social activity. Both the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Act and the Small Charges Act make provision for this. Applications are necessary so that the police can be aware of these activities and can advise on safety and act and allocate appropriate security resources to ensure public safety and security at these events. I would like to advise that there is no outer limit on the time to apply for permission. Indeed, we have already approved events slated for June this year. I say this to say that events must be approved before organizers or promoters begin to advertise their events. There is no reason to advertise your event before you are given approval. I would like to thank the general public for your continued cooperation and support for our efforts to protect you, and we urge your continued support. I will leave you by reminding you that our health authorities have not given us an all clear as yet. We are still required to be responsible and to ensure that we protect ourselves against infection. You are advised to wear a face mask when you're in public, practice good hand hygiene and sanitization behavior, avoid crowds and crowded places where possible, maintain a physical distance of 3 to 6 feet from others when in public, and if at all possible, ensure that you become vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Henry. I now invite the Director of Statistics in the Department of Statistics in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Mr. Carlton Phipps, who will give us a presentation on the population and housing census. Mr. Phipps.
Pleasant good afternoon to all. I'm here today to make brief remarks on the upcoming population and housing census with the aim of bringing a greater awareness to the importance of the census and to encourage the full cooperation of all. Now, the population and housing census is an international, regional, and national activity. In St. Kitts Nevis, this project is conducted by the Statistics Department within the Ministry of Sustainable Development. It was initially scheduled for 2021, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic situation, we had to postpone our activities until now. But notwithstanding this, my team and I at the Statistics Department, we have been working behind the scene to ready us for a moment like now. As indicated before, COVID-19 cases are very low, and we felt that this is a convenient time for us to get on with the conduct of the census. So, over the last few weeks, the department has been training a number of eligible persons to assist in the data collection for the census. And starting next week, and then going over the next 2 months, our enumerators will be making house-to-house calls to undertake the census data collection. Herein, we will collect and update the count of the number of persons living in St. Kitts Nevis, and additionally, information collected on such areas as housing, age, ethnicity, education and attainment, employment status of persons. Notably, the last census was conducted in 2011, that is some 11 years ago, and such information is more or less outdated and a need to update these statistics. Indeed, your information is important to enable us at the Statistics Department to report accurately as to the makeup of our population. Your information is key to sound decision-making, whether it is in the government or within the private sector. Your information is essential to provide the general public with general knowledge about our population. Of key importance, must note, our field workers clearly identified or outfitted, will be outfitted as representatives of the Statistics Department. These persons, having taken an oath of secrecy, are bounded by law to ensure that your personal information remains strictly confidential. Additionally, our department continues to work closely with the NEOC task force, COVID-19 task force, to ensure that the pandemic in St. Kitts Nevis remain under control. Additionally, our field workers are being educated on COVID-19 risk reduction strategy, and we will be providing them with personal protective equipment to minimize the risk of any community spread while we are in the field. I said to you, our country needs you to be counted, regardless of your country of birth, your residency status, your ethnic background, your religion, etc. If St. Kitts or Nevis is your country of residence, you are to be counted. Your household should be counted. Therefore, I encourage you to encourage your family, your friends, your relatives to play your part and cooperate with our enumerators. Our slogan, it's me, you, us, 2021 census. Indeed, everyone count. Let us make it our part, or let us play our part as part of our collective responsibility to ensure that the census is a success. The success of the census would help support the building of a more progressive, sustainable, and more resilient St. Kitts Nevis economy. The success of the census also helps in achieving an improved standard of living for the citizens and residents of both islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. Be counted, for everyone counts in the 2021 round of the Population and Housing Census. Help us to help you shape the future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phipps, for your presentation on the Population and Housing Census. We now invite Mr. Abdia Samuel, the chair of the National COVID-19 Task Force and our National Disaster Coordinator, to give us his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good afternoon to all. Mr. Williams, I too want to use this opportunity to encourage our citizens, residents, to support the National Housing and Census, Population and Housing Census activities. They are very important for the National Emergency Management Agency or National Disaster Management Framework. It will help us with our preparedness. It will help us with our response for specific areas. It will also identify for us areas for the vulnerable according to various demographic groups. And it will help us with our distribution process as well as our business continuity planning in the event that we are impacted by a major emergency. So again, please do your best to support the census operations and activities, cooperate. It's something that, again, will be down to the benefit of you, the citizens, and the country by extension. And also, Mr. Williams, to start on a light note, we realize we have on your podium, so I was so elated that we didn't have to use the step up for us to make presentations. So, I realized that we have gotten a little taller. So we welcome this bittersweet moment whereby we are closing off. I can recall approximately 2 years and some time ago, I heard about the new CMO, Dr. Hazel Laws. I didn't know her. She would have made a presentation at our small Adventist Spanish church because we both share the same religion. And then I'm told that, yes, Dr. Wilkinson, we share the same religion. Right, so, yeah, denomination, right, denomination, sorry, denomination. So, when we saw the pandemic happening in China, I would have reached out to Dr. Laws and said, you know, as the National Disaster Coordinator, I would like to meet with you regarding this potential risk that is existing. And we met very early. We began discussions with SEDEMA very early. We began discussion with CAFA very early. I remember Mr. Brian Dyer and myself would have actually mobilized SEDEMA to have a regional meeting so that we could have gotten a presentation by CAFA. And in that meeting, Mr. Dyer and myself were labeled alarmist because we were told that it's not going to reach in our area, it was too far. Then we told the facilitator from CAFA then that globalization has brought countries closer rather than keeping them far apart. There was a lot of back and forth, but eventually, a few months down the line, they saw that what we were talking about when we started to get a number of Chinese residents and citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis returning from their celebrations in China. In that instance, we started to mobilize and we started to move, and we started with a small group where our focus was mainly on borders. We started with our border management. We started to look at the border surveillance, and then we started to prepare for the inevitable. If you could remember, some of you, the slogan that started with CMO Dr. Hazelars would have stated it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when, and that's the motto that we applied. The other motto that we applied was the art of society approach. And then we saw what happened with the art of society approach. I don't know if you all recall our cities, our residents come together in this response. We would have had Mr. Theodore Prince Brown. I don't know if you all remember Mr. Brown, work at Customs. He was the first person to reach here to the NEOC briefings, and he would have made his first donation to the cause of 1,000 EC dollars. From there on, we got all sorts of donations where we got cake with our pictures on it. I mean, these things really motivated us. They pushed us to go above and beyond the call of duty. So, you know, we were supported by you, and that's why Dr. Wilkinson and Dr. Laws would have used, and also Superintendent Henry would have used the opportunity to thank you, the general public. I don't want to be repetitious. I want to bring a different spin to it. So CMO would have spoken about the first wave, second wave, third wave, and this fourth wave. You all remember when we started with the infodemic. That's the first thing we had, an infodemic. Every minute we used to get a call. The first case reach it, ain't reach it, you don't reach it. We hiding it, we ain't hiding it. And you know, all we did is remain focused and basically start to fight another pandemic, another crisis, which was the infodemic. You hear oftentimes, that's why I would have come there to talk about disinformation, misinformation in his eloquent way. Right? And we fought that, and we would have had Dr. Wilkinson. Trust me, Dr. Wilkinson, I learned to admire you and love you. I never really knew you before COVID. I heard about you, but I never knew you. And, you know, you taught me a lot within these past 2 years, you know. The CMO as well, you know, she can go inches if you really get her to that point. So, you know, it was a good family approach that we had. So we start with the public awareness and sensitization on COVID-19 situation. And we started with the risk communication, which is these briefings. And that is what helped us to fight the infodemic. So eventually we saw all this misinformation, disinformation started to subside. And then you, the general public, helped us by focusing on the briefings. Them times you have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 persons watching the briefings. Everybody was interested. Everybody put their hands on deck, and we were on board on the same train. And then started that first briefing. And that first briefing was simple. We took the cameras, we took everything, ZIZ came, and it was a simple table. From there on, we started and we modernized it to what we have today. You see, we have the nice background, speaking about the corona, telling you who are the teams involved, Ministry of Health, NEMO, and others. So we started that process. We decided that we needed to enhance the process to be more inclusive. Here came Ms. Jacob. Ms. Jacob came and she had signals and she came with everything and sign language. Ms. Jacob don't watch me, so. And we had fun, so it became a family, so everybody, I remember one time Ms. Jacob probably made a little something, I don't know if it was a mistake, and I tell you, the general public let us have it through social media. So these were fun things, it was fun. At times it was challenging, but we had fun in serving you for the past 2 years. And I think we did an excellent job in remaining focused among the adversity that we also face. To the critics, we also welcome you. You were part of the process. The only thing is that some of you would have gone a little too far in terms of that. And, that was not welcome. I don't think that is what we really wanted in a time of crisis. So I hope that all of us have learned our lessons in terms of how far we can take things. I know we see the situation what happened with Will Smith and Chris Rock. And, everybody has emotions. So I'm hoping that critics going forward, you will somewhat sharpen and somewhat mold your way of engaging, because your critic also help us in the fight. You open our eyes to many things. That was important. Over time, as I said, the technology increased. John James came on board and he brought some technology to us. And then what changed and transpired, everything with the technology and the presentation, was when we started that all-of-society approach, when we had different stakeholders coming and making presentation, and Ms. Patricia Walters, the CEO of the cable, actually was the first presenter that we had who made a presentation using slides. And from there on, everybody wanted slides. That was the in thing. Everybody wanted the presentation and the slide. The only person who ain't using a slide, guess who? Superintendent Henry. Never used a slide yet that I can recall. Always reading. Because you see the voice that he has, he projected, when you say, he gave that monotone that, gave authority. Right, Superintendent? So in the first wave, let's look at the first wave. So we had the confirmation of the 2 cases, but everybody calling. I remember getting calls. CMO and I were making a presentation at Public Works, to the Public Works, the Ministry of Public Works, and we got about 20 calls before we could start our presentation. We hear it here yet. It's in Sandy Point. It's in Tabernacle. It's in Molineux. It was over Frigate Bay. Some people just come in on a boat. I'm telling you, it was crazy. Then on March 30th, as was stated, we had the EOC activated. Then what I love is how the general public, the general public, got involved in the state of emergency. The general public kept us on our toes with the regulations. If the regulations did not come out on the night prior to the expiration, the night of it expiring, by the next morning, the general public, we start an infodemic. Where is the regulation? Does it mean it is over? So, these are the things that kept us going and make sure that we had everything in place, because you lost some of your civil liberties. But actually, you were our watchdog to make sure that we stayed on our toes. Then we looked at the challenges with accessing essential goods. Remember the long lines and at the supermarkets, the challenges with the supermarkets. We go into the night. Curfews. The curfew started. Fellows trying to get over to the girlfriend, and Superintendent Henry had to run behind them to send them back home. These are some of the things that, we have gone through that now we could look at it and, learn from it, but also have a little laugh, because some things are just, you could have a little smile from. Then we look at the emergency relief fund that was established, and as I said before, Theodore Prince Brown was the first person to come up here and give his contribution, and he sparked off that particular response. We then expanded our team. We look at the establishing of the compliance task force. We look at things such as reopening sectors. We strengthened our border management and port health surveillance. And guess what? In 2020, what did we have? Some major activities. General elections. We prepared for the general elections. Those activities, we gave guidance, and then we moved on from general elections and continued the fight. Then we introduced the online immigration and customs form. And what would happen then is that persons had some challenges, and why do I have to fill out a form? Why do I have to do this? But it was a critical tool. What we simply did is we introduced e-commerce. You realize that we said we had to go touchless. And I was in a meeting today where I had a presentation by a gentleman from New Jersey to the CDMO member states. And he spoke about e-commerce, you know, taking forms and putting them on e-platform. And everybody remember we had the online entry form, the KNA travel form.kn. So thanks to the IT department and Ophelia and the team that basically took our concept, and they actually brought it to reality. So no longer you have to follow the immigration and customs form and walk with it in your passport. We don't need that. You completed it, and you walked up to the immigration port health, and you were processed. Yes, the process was a bit slow because it was something new. So, you know, we used trial and error, but eventually we warmed up to it. We used to get complaints every day. Then everything started to subside as we, you know, gradually made it better. And today, you hardly hear anything about the entry process. So we learned lessons from these things. Then again, we had the reopening of the borders. You remember the virtual Culturama? Abonati, kudos to you and your team. We had a massive virtual Culturama. And then behind that came the National Carnival Committee, say, hey, listen, we could carry out a virtual carnival. And they said it's one of the best carnival they had in a long time. You know, I think they could say jam where you are and everything else. But then we moved on to 2021 where things got better. Do you remember something that we facilitated that brought attention to the country? We facilitated the below deck. The below deck came January to April 2021, and is a reality series. This took place at the Christoph Harbor. They stayed over at the Southeast Peninsula. We were able to create a bubble for them, and I am happy to say not one case, let me say it again, not one case came out of that activity from January to April. And I think if you look on Bravo, channel Bravo, you will see the series actually playing out. I was happy, I was proud to see St. Kitts being displayed. You would have seen Christoph Harbor, you've seen a lot of areas over at the peninsula, you would have seen other areas of St. Kitts and Nevis and the global market, international market. So I'm proud of the team that were able to put this together and support it, in particular, the cabinet of ministers. Then we had MSR Media, who would have stated to us, listen, based on the work that was done in St. Kitts and Nevis in managing the pandemic and the reputation we built in the Caribbean region as one of the countries, small island state that best managed the pandemic, they decided to come to St. Kitts and Nevis to basically do their filming and produce films. And we have seen that they have produced a number of films. I remember in the early discussions with them, they wanted to go to Barbados. The thing was to go to Barbados. They were leaning towards Barbados, but when they looked at what we have done in St. Kitts and Nevis, they said, hey, listen, this is a great place to come and make this investment. And this kudos to all the team, in particular you, the general public. Then we move on to the next wave, which is the second wave. And then, you know, we saw the COVID testing in schools, the increase in cases in the schools, the shift system in the schools. Then we see how the public and private sector was severely impacted. Then we moved on to wave 3. And in wave 3, we saw that the vaccination process for the schools started, the challenges in the reopening of the cruise and the hotel sector, you know, because everybody didn't like the restrictions, but eventually everybody warmed up to it, everybody understood, and today we have a resilient tourism product here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Equally so, we continued with the easing of restrictions on entertainment, and yes, the entertainment was one of the sectors that farms, you cannot expect to have such a large national response and not have persons oppose things. These are natural things. These are things that are welcome. We are not going to be engaging in a back and forth. We have to accept those criticism and learn from them, pull out what we need to learn from, and other things you just have to let it go to the waste bin. Then we saw the hosting of the National Carnival 2021. Everybody remember? Bubble Juve for the vaccinated, fully vaccinated. And then here came Omicron, wave 4. Then what we decided to do, say, hey, listen, we help you. We have fought 3 major waves. You went and you had your Juve, you had your fun, fully vaccinated. We had Omicron, we have wave 4. Yeah, we saw an increase in cases, and then eventually we saw things to start to subside. As things started to subside, then what we decided that it's time to hand the responsibility over to you, the general public. And that is why we are seeing the many easing of restrictions. So now that we carry the burden for you for 4 major waves, this wave, we handed over the responsibility to you. So you saw the fencing at Posante come down. You saw a number of restrictions come down. You see this, as Dr. Wilkinson said, you see all these social activities that are happening. And eventually up to today, I've been having some discussion with some persons where they are so happy now that the rapid antigen tests, which now may be $30, $40 as opposed to paying $150, $200 for a PCR test, will be accepted. I think that is highly commendable. And I want to thank everyone for the patience. We had to be guided by our medical experts, following the science, studying the various practices globally, not just in the Caribbean. So Dr. Laws and Dr. Wilkinson were charged with making sure that they go do the research, and they will come and advise. And when they advise, we gave our logistical input to what they are saying, how we could implement, how we could look at this. And then what happens, which you don't understand, is that the power is not in Dr. Wilkinson, Dr. Laws, and myself, Commissioner Brandy, to just decide, yes, that's going to happen like that. No. After we meet, we have to package that information, and we go to cabinet. We were going to cabinet every Monday. Every Monday, cabinet would then make a decision whether they accept the recommendation, or sometimes cabinet will say to us, well, go back, do some further research, and then come back to us with a reviewed position, and then they will deliberate and give us the outcome of their deliberation. That's how the process functions, and that's why I too want to concur with Dr. Wilkinson in terms of the astute leadership that was provided by the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris during this time, and the other cabinet members, the entire cabinet. But in particular, I want to highlight 2 ministers who basically gave of their time and sacrifice. The Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Vincent Byron Jr., who I see personally as a father figure based on the relationship that we have developed over the years as the chair of the Disaster Mitigation Council. And I say that publicly because of how close a friendship we have and bond we have built outside of work, where I cannot go by glory and get my glass of passion fruit juice. Seymour used to give me lime. I also want to highlight Minister Wendy Phipps, who is the co-chair of the Disaster Mitigation Council, who have come like a big sister to me, inside and outside of work, and who is actually here every time we had a briefing, in particular when we had them every day. If you don't know, Minister Phipps, we share passion because my mother is ill. She too is taking care of her bedridden, ill mother. And to be here every day serving the general public, we ain't getting an extra cent, we ain't getting nothing, just for the sake of service to country. I think that's highly commendable. You cannot want a sacrifice like that from any human being in any country. So I really want to highlight their sacrifice and contribution to our response to this pandemic. Then The music festival committee came and said, hey, listen, everything happening, we think we could have this happen. And we looked at it, we got the recommendations, everybody get the input, we have the security forces. When you hear Henry give his talk, you know what I mean? You listen, he commands that respect. And then you have CMO who will put on a couple inches and then give and then we have Dr. Wilkinson, he's a surgeon, straight. You understand what I'm saying? So we had so much diverse expertise on hand that they were able to provide us with proper guidance for us to be able to serve you and serve you well. So the music festival is going to be hosted from the 23rd to the 25th of June, 2022, with over 5,000 patrons each night, 5,000 to 6,000 patrons each night. We are hopeful that this can be a success as we demonstrate to the world that we are ready to return to that sense of normalcy. I want to take this opportunity, after basically blabbing so much, to give a multi-sectorial approach, because let me just say, we experience some great things and we experience some bad things. But all in all, one of the things I want to thank the team for is their respect and their loyalty to service to country. Yes, we had differences of opinions. Yes, we had differences in the way we did things. But one thing I want to commend them for is that we stuck together, we kept it behind closed doors, and we made sure that at the end of the day, when we come before you with a united front so that you could be confident of what we were doing. That was very important for me. That was a lesson learned for me in terms of group dynamics, team dynamics. And it's important for our young leaders that are coming up, for them to see that, hey, historically, I don't know, I've never been through a pandemic, I don't know if I will live to see another one, but they can see how different professionals came together in a multi-sectorial approach, and they were able to guide a country. They were able to guide a country through a crisis like none of us have experienced since, if you're not over 110 years old. So again, I want to basically encourage the young leaders, the young teams, and others to see how working in a united way can bring success to a nation. We also saw the experience of the first female president of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Ms. Giselle Matthews. That was historic as well, and we want to commend them. So I take this opportunity to commend the cabinet, again, the astute leadership of the Prime Minister, accessible. We used to have to wake him up 3 o'clock in the morning when we need to, accessible. The fact his involvement in making sure that he listens. He never once said, go this way, go that way. He listened and he listened and he listened, and he gave word of advice for us to be able to continue doing our work. Again, the other members of cabinet that listened, Premier Mark Brantley and others, who also were engaged, because we took a federal approach. This was not a St. thing or a Nevis thing. We worked together. I want to thank the members of the National COVID-19 Task Force, the public sector, the permanent secretaries. Yes, I called you out. I remember that very well, but it's because we wanted to bring that level of attention to you so that you can come on board with all hands on deck approach. The Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Commerce, private sector, the tourism authority, tourism sector, the various media houses, the NGOs, hoteliers, and I want to pause at the hoteliers because they did a wonderful job in the tourism sector. They helped us a lot with our corridor of containment. Taxi operators, they were critical. Those taxi operators who went and got vaccinated, who did the petitions with their taxis and did everything. You see some nice creative things. You see some guys did some nice creative labels and so on. And, we were able to work with them well to maintain the corridor of containment. We also, the hoteliers, I want to thank Miss Anna McNutt for the Marriott Hotel. We want to Mr. Mark Schneider at Park Hyatt. We want to thank Ruby Garcia and Henry Thomas. I hope I have the name correct. Yvette, don't kill me. We also want to thank Darren Thompson from Royal St. Kitts Hotel. We also want to thank Denise Wilson there at Ocean's Edge. We also want to thank Timothy Beach Resort. Timothy Beach Resort. First we had Mr. Boone, and then from Mr. Boone we had Shelder. Yes, Shelder. Lord Shelder, don't kill me. We also had, Seymour, help me out here, Claudia Sanchez. Yes, Claudia, don't kill me. That's where the bald head come from. Yeah, Claudia at Marriott Vacation Club. So we had, for those on Nevis that I cannot remember all of you, my apologies, but we had a wonderful relationship and we had wonderful support from you. Without you, a number of initiatives, people may not know that you, for example, the vacation in place terminology came from Mr. Mark Schneider at Park Hyatt. When we were meeting with the hoteliers, he said, hey, listen, let us do a vacation in place, and the vacation in place can happen so and so on. So, no, to those critics who said that we don't listen and we don't this, actually we were being driven by the experts in the different sectors. And all we did is put our spin. The security forces gave the recommendation. The medical team gave the recommendation. We gave the recommendation. And collectively, we developed protocols for these areas. So no, we didn't just enforce them on it. It was a consultative approach. I want to also thank the security forces. We could not have done it without the police, without defense force, and also private security. How many of you remember having to pay for private security to make sure you're outside your house and you don't come out, right? So we want to thank them. The Compliance Task Force, Ministry of Health, NEMA staff, NDMD staff, SCASPA, NASPA, National Security on a whole, Immigration Department, Customs, Excise, and also SKNIS and Mr. Leslie Williams. How could we forget Mr. Williams? My partner, Mr. Williams. So I also want to take this opportunity to basically highlight the members of the National COVID-19 Task Force before we end. We have the Honorable Vincent Byron Jr., who is the Attorney General and the Chair of the Mitigation Council. Honorable Wendy Phipps, Minister of International Trade et al., and who is the co-chair of the Mitigation Council. Abdia Samuel, who is the chair of the task force. Dr. Hazel Laws, who is the chair of the HEOC and the co-chair of the task force. Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, Medical Chief of Staff. Mr. Hilroy Brandy, Commissioner of Police. Mr. Anthony Comrie, Commander of the Defense Force. Ms. Marceline Hughes, Chief Immigration Officer. Ms. Lonlia Archibald, Senior System Controller of Customs. Ms. Kebas, Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ophelia Blanchard, ICT Development Coordinator, E-Government. Cromwell Henry, Superintendent of Police. Mr. Leslie Williams, Director General, SKNIS. Mr. Travis Rogers, Superintendent of Police. Mr. Kennedy De Silva, Head of Compliance Task Force. Mr. Rohan Walters, Legal Researcher, Law Commission. Ms. Raquel Brown, Raquel, we miss you. Former CEO, St. Kitts Tourism Authority. Trust me, one great character to deal with. Dr. Judy Nisbet, Medical Officer of Health and Nevis. And Mr. Brian Dyer, Director, National Disaster Management Department and Nevis. Mr. Michael Manners, Nevis Air and Seaport Authority. Ms. Jacqueline Brown, Deputy Chief Immigration Officer. Ms. Kenisha Williams, Administrative Officer. Mr. Jusan Gordon, Administrative Officer. Mr. Denzel Don James, we miss you, former CEO of SCASPA. Mr. Walter Andrew Bass, he was the Deputy Commander of the St. Kitts Nevis Defense Force. Mr. Bass, and also Mr. Ivor Keith Phillip, who is the President CEO of SCASPA. I would like to extend to you our deepest gratitude to all donors during the period of the NEOC briefings, and you know who you are. I want to thank everyone who have supported it. But most importantly, for these briefings, I want to thank Mr. Leslie Williams. I know some of you complain, oh, Leslie don't read me questions. Lesroy dismisses. I don't like how Lesroy dealt with my questions. Lesroy Williams is Lesroy Williams. Okay? We love him that way, and we will continue to love him that way. I want to thank Dr. Hazel Laws. I wish I had the little step so I could have seen, because many of you have asked me what it is that Dr. Laws steps up on. Mr. Williams, you could share the steps for me, please. I'm going to show you. So, Dr. Laws, we had to get this special step because somebody stated. Thank you very much. That's the special step we had for Dr. Laws. So, Dr. Laws had a special step. I want to thank Miss Christmas Jacob. Miss Christmas Jacob, you remember, I wonder if you're going to say it with your hands now. You remember when you, whatever it was, you made everybody call, talk to the lady with the sign language, right? Well, you ain't saying it. Right. Right. So we had some fun with Miss Jacob. I want to thank Lejon James, my technician here at NEMO. He started from zero. Now he's actually running the programming with AJ. I also want to thank AJ. AJ make sure that he stayed consistent to make sure that the programming was on point. I want to thank Dr. Marisa Cathy. Dr. Cathy works with the team at Health Promotion Unit to make sure that Dr. Laws or Dr. Wilkinson, when he was acting, had his presentation and data, ready to present it to you, the general public. Because this data don't stay here and think it's an Nevis. This data goes worldwide. I've had persons in the UK, I had persons in the United States of America actually sending the infographic and say, you sure this is correct? We've been following, and persons will pull a whole month of cards and say, we've been monitoring, and we have the counts. People were actually counting. John James, he was the man behind the technology. I want to thank you, John James. There was a famous line I remember saying, John James, load it up. And James, sorry that them girls took it the wrong way. My apologies to you, Mr. James. I want to thank Miss Ophelia Blanchard, who is always here. So you see the lot of ICT and the transformation, the digital transformation that is happening. That is all Miss Blanchard and her team. But I come into it. I come into the Calypso, right? I was hoping to have it on board. AJ, pull up that Calypso to the end. We have to play to close off the show, right? Then we had Vesta Southwell, who was with us, but then she left, and then we had Michelle, who came in with a nice voice. Michelle is not my cousin. Michelle, I am a Samuel. Michelle is Rodriguez. She's with a Q. In Spanish, we use the G, Rodriguez. So, people, she's French, I am Spanish. So she's not my cousin, okay? Right. So Michelle, thank you for all what you have done. Tell me who will miss Superintendent Henry. He come here with that thing, but he forget the glasses. We will never forget him. We built some strong relationships. And again, Dr. Wilkinson, and when Dr. Wilkinson coming up, right? Dr. Wilkinson had a thing. Do you know when Dr. Wilkinson coming to be a surgeon? He has a thing that when he walking up, once you see him fix his tie 3 times, surgery coming. Surgery was coming, yeah? And Dr. Laws had a way, when you see Dr. Laws going to grow inches, she would say, ah. Once we hear that, we know that, she need the step. She won't just go the inches. It was fun. I think we had a great time together. Please remain vigilant. It's not over. We want to continue to work behind the lines. However, I must end by saying that we went through a critical crisis in our lifetime. I want to thank everyone. But I must say to you, yes, I came to St. Kitts back in 1987, 88, somewhere. A little boy. Mr. actually taught me in junior high. Remember, it was junior high, it wasn't washy. We had to go from grade 6 to junior high, first and second farm. And if you're in the good, you stay third farm up there. Mr. Phipps taught me maths. And St. Kitts provided an opportunity for me as a young man of a different ethnic background. Attacking me for being of a different ethnic background to you, at first it can be demoralizing, and that was in my early stages. But now, I'm actually proud that I being of a different ethnic background, can contribute to the country. I remember I wanted to be a policeman first, and I went by the police station by a farm, and by the policewoman handled me so rough. I said, well, not me, me want. And then eventually, when the fire department was breaking off, we joined. But guess what? When we joined the fire department, we were still under the police. It was Commissioner from Nevis, Foy, Mr. Commissioner Foy. Henry used to kill me in pity. Henry used to be fit now, he ain't fit now. He used to be fit, have us running up and down the place and, doing different things. And that provided a good opportunity for all of us where, we grow. I was proud to say that October of this year is going to make me 23 years, because we joined in 1999, 23 years of service to this federation. I had many opportunities to go overseas and live, but I just fell in love with the tranquility and the peace that we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So to those of you who could keep continuously attacking some persons of different ethnic background to you, all you're doing is strengthening us. Yes, I am not from here. That's public knowledge. But guess what? I know I am a contributing citizen of this country, and I will continue to do so with distinction and good grace and honor. To our leaders, I have to say thank you, because we couldn't do it. I remember boasting off in one of our national disasters regional meeting where I said to the guys, we have one of the best cabinet in the world, because sometimes we needed to, when we brief in the PM, Dr. Timothy Harris, he will say, well, he will ask, he likes to ask, well, what is the practice in other countries? What is doing done? And I could have taken up my phone, being right there, and call one of my colleagues, and, allow them to interact with the Prime Minister. I mean, they will call me later and they say, Mr. Sam, it's obvious, you really was able to get the Prime Minister to talk to me? Because, you don't really get that opportunity. And that's, to me, that touched the core of my heart to know that our Prime Minister was able to come down to these levels and be able to even speak with my colleagues throughout the region so that we could actually learn from them their practices, and then we can analyze and have decisions and make decisions. I think that was critical, that was important. I could also recall being able to call all the ministers of government and address them with concerns related to their ministries and our response. And they all gave their efforts to support our response. So again, we are appealing to everyone to continue this togetherness until we get the all clear from Dr. Laws that we are no longer, and Dr. Wilkinson, listen, we no longer have to wear masks, we no longer have to have these protocols. Now, what are we going to do about the traveling, the travel farm? Some of you are saying, oh, when are we going to remove the travel farm? When are we going to do this? We have had recommendations, let me just say to you, from the border agencies, for example, Immigration and Customs, who have stated that they want the electronic farm to remain. What we have advised Cabinet is that we want to move it from the approval process to a facilitatory process, where what you will be doing is uploading immigration and customs card rather than writing up the paper, and you will just have it there electronically. So when you arrive or you land in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, it will be a seamless process rather than you be worrying about paper and everything else. So eventually, yes, you complete the form, you get a barcode, a number, and you show it at the agent, by the agent's desk. If you don't have it, if you arrive with it, then we put you in the welcome center, you complete the form, and then you are processed. So eventually, we are going to get there, and we are hopeful that we could get there in the near future. But for us to get there, we have to work together. We have to remain strong and together to ensure that we maintain resiliency here in St. Kitts and Nevis. My colleagues, thank you very much. We're going to miss this. It's a bittersweet moment. but we have to move on. So, Mr. Williams, thanks to you, thanks to everybody, thank you, the general public, for all that you have done to make our response and recovery process a success. See you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel, for thanking almost everybody. But of course, you know, these briefings cannot end without one or two questions. And they were designed, these briefings were designed for you, so that you can have an avenue where you can ask your questions and that they can be answered by the relevant authorities, of course, which is an important part of the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so these questions I will ask. Von Radio, will the vaccination campaign continue for free within the Federation or in the foreseeable future? And will vaccines remain free of charge for persons who are interested in receiving booster shots? And the other one is they want Mr. Phipps to repeat the security measures in place for the general public. But I do know that there is a replay of this briefing. I think it's on ZIZ, and there will be many rebroadcast of it. But Mr. Phipps, you are invited to come and to speak to the security measures again about the population and housing census. And then there is one more. Somebody wants to know what happens going forward. Are we going to still have the mask mandate? Are unvaccinated persons, will they still be required to quarantine? And those are the ones for now.
I am not aware of anyone who has had to pay for a vaccine at any health center in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and the same will hold for the COVID-19 vaccine. Yes, the vaccines come at a cost to the government, but to the people of the Federation or to anyone living here, it is free. And that's why for the last year plus, we've been encouraging you to go forward. And as I said in my presentation, the vaccine is critically important for us to go forward. So those persons who are asking about when are we going to get rid of the mask, when are we going to get rid of our quarantine and etc. for even the unvaccinated, it is by us continuing to increase the threshold of vaccination immunity. You heard the CMO said that the goal from the World Health Organization is that we have 70% of the population vaccinated. Right now we're at 56 points, so we have a long way to go. I think I answered those questions.
Just to recap on the security measures. So for our enumerators, they would be clothed in a vest, also have a name tag that would represent them as working for the statistics department. As I also mentioned that in terms of considering the COVID-19 situation, it is low, but not zero. That persons would have face masks, face shields, hand sanitizers. They would also have with them a checklist in terms of going to a household. They would ask, is anyone experiencing, basically if anyone is experiencing any sort of COVID-19 symptoms. If anyone is experiencing such or anyone in the household have COVID, then we would delay the interview of that household until a later time. Also, didn't mention, but we also will be collaborating with the police, very importantly, to ensure the security of our officers. They will be making surveillance in the field while we are working. Thank you.
Okay, so we have two more questions. One is for either Dr. Wilkinson or Dr. Laws. What happens when I travel to the Far East and get an antigen test and get the approval to come, but by the time I arrive, it is over 24 hours due to travel time?
I think the protocol says 24 hours before you travel. So you don't necessarily have to get here within 24 hours. We know that there are some trips it can take 36 hours to get here. And so once you take it 24 hours before you travel, it will be accepted.
And our ultimate question for the day, what are the rules during music festival for vaccinated and unvaccinated people to enter St. Kitts and Nevis?
Yeah. Mr. Williams, sorry. Yes, the health and travel protocols remain the same. Unvaccinated, you come in, you have to do 7 days quarantine. You can do that quarantine at home, and then on day 7, you will be tested, and once you're negative, you will be released. The unvaccinated have the land and go. The unvaccinated, once you meet all the criteria according to the entry process, you basically land and you go, and you could go straight to the music festival. So if you want to enjoy, if you're unvaccinated and you want to enjoy, we're asking you to do. Come in at least 8 days before the event and go through the process, and you can enjoy music festival. So we are welcoming everyone. We want to welcome vaccinated and unvaccinated. Please visit the www.covid19.gov.kn website, or go to the knatravelfarm.kn platform, and you will see the first thing when you go to that, you will see the health and travel protocols. Please read those, and you will get your information right there. So please don't let that stop you from coming. Hopefully by then, our health experts might advise us, and by then we may be able to review the protocols, and maybe you may see that the protocol, some further restrictions may be eased. So stay tuned. If anything, please contact the numbers that are on the KNA Travel Farm website, and also on the covid19.gov.kn website. I tell her when see him put on to inches, you got to listen. Remember, I've been asked this question a lot, because up to today I've had this debate about 10 different questions, calls about it. If you are a non-national, meaning you don't hold a student visa, you don't hold residency or a work permit, and you are unvaccinated, as of now, the legislation will not allow you to enter St. Kitts and Nevis unless special consideration is granted by the cabinet. Again, cabinet will have to make a decision if you are a non-national without any of the status I just listed and unvaccinated to be allowed to enter the federation. The vaccinated, whether citizens, residents, unvaccinated can enter, but have to do the 7 days quarantine. If you are vaccinated, you're free to come, land and go. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the briefing, and I won't have to thank persons because so many thank yous have been given. I would normally do that at the end. But just to say that I want to thank you, the general public, for tuning in to these briefings. You play a very important role in the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think by and large, we are a well-behaved society. And there are little hiccups here and there, but it's because of your behavior, your adherence to the COVID-19 regulations, that we have been able to be successful with the management of the pandemic thus far. We do not know what lies ahead, but what we do know is that we are in a better place than we were 2 years ago. Now, when I look at some societies, they were protesting. People were protesting. Some developed countries, some developing countries. Why were they protesting? Because it's not easy when your fundamental rights and freedoms are curtailed. It is not easy when you're told that you have to stay home for 24 hours, or that you have to reach home by 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Nobody likes that sort of a thing, and especially when government has to be doing that, especially a democratic society, because sometimes some people see it as, an encroachment on their rights and their freedoms. Nonetheless, this happens at times because of certain situations that may arise, just like we had just like the pandemic. And so therefore, I think we have to give commendation to the public and to all of us. It is not an easy thing. When people exercise that sort of, and a government exercise that sort of control over you, some people think it borders on dictatorship. And we are a democratic society. But we understand the reasons for it, and that is basically to save lives. I think that has been the objective all throughout, a life first strategy. And of course, Dr. Wilkins mentioned the vaccination rate, that we have done so well. And going forward, at least we have that layer of protection, even if, the subvariant that they're speaking about that is now in the US and in the UK, and you're seeing some cases rising. And I am sure at some point it is going to reach here too. Just like how the virus, initially it was out there and it reached here. We're one of the last countries, I think, in the Americas to have the COVID-19 virus to reach our shores. And people were wondering how it is that we were doing so well. I mean, it was all in the international news and so on. But nonetheless, the virus came and we had to manage it. And we have done very well. We are very sad, of course, that we have had some deaths because, of course, that is always a sad thing for the family and for the country and so on, to have deaths because of the virus. But nonetheless, we have learned quite a bit. I have been honored to be the host of these briefings, and it has been a pleasure to serve. It hasn't always been very easy, and some of you, of course, would have seen my facial expressions, sometimes especially when some of the questions that I get and so on. I think by now you know what my facial expression actually means. Not intentional, but it is who I am. And of course, the voice. Most of you now know my voice, and there are people who sometimes before they see me and they hear the voice, they say, oh, that's the COVID man. So even in a dark room, or in a dark place, if people hear my voice, they will know whose voice it is. Superintendent, I don't know if this is such a good thing or a bad thing. But thank you so much to all of you. And of course, we continue to remain very vigilant, not because these briefings are not going to be for a while. It doesn't mean that we let down our guard in terms of the management. We are still managing the pandemic because anything can arise. It is still a fluid situation, and as long as there are 2 cases in the world, it simply means that we are still at risk. And so therefore, we have to continue to be vigilant, vigilant, vigilant. Thank you very much. I am Les Roy Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Team COVID-19. Step into the mic in the studio is Dr. Laws, our beloved CMO, Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Wilkinson, and Mr. Les Roy Williams. Team COVID-19 on the front line, coming to you in Calypso rhyme. So sit back, relax, and listen to what they have to say and the role they want you to play. Easy.
Early in January this year, our federation woke up in fear because a little virus out there in Wuhan was slowly making its way to our land. They say its name was SARS Corona, and our lives it planned to devour. So we're here to come up quickly with a little plan to save our beautiful nation.
If it's a plan they want, then plan they will get. Because of people's lives we have to protect. Close down the airport and send back them big tourist ships so we could focus on this pandemic. Mr. MCS, I'm begging you please, as I pray to God from down on my knees. Now let's get all our hospitals and staff in order to battle this corona.
Well, Madam COO, I hear you loud and clear. We will win this fight, don't worry, don't fear. I'll sound the alarm and get all hands on deck. This war we will win and our people protect. To win this war we must flatten the curve. But don't overwhelm the nurses and doctors. Personal responsibility you must take indeed if we are to succeed.
Cover your mouth, we say cover your nose. This will stop the spread to those who are close. Lock yourself inside during the curfew. Under quarantine, to thine own self be true. Wash from your elbows down to your hands with soap and water, it's a simple plan. If you follow these simple instructions daily, from this virus we'll soon be free. Easy! Now I know what you're thinking, but I only assisted with the recording. This song is not my composition, but brought to me by Dr. Wilkinson. Between Les Roy and the CMO, they've come up with this great kaiso. So after whipping COVID-19 behind, there'll be Sugar Mass 49. Easy!